From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good evening. This is it. So we're wrapping up. If some of you weren't here before, this is history. This is the first ever graphic novel night for the National Book Festival. We're filming. You guys are a part of history. And Jeff is a headliner for a part of this history, as he should be. Just to go over the things you might not know, my name is Michael Kavna, graphic novel reviewer, columnist, cartoonist for the Washington Post. You can find all this in the Comic Riffs blog, Twitter handles Comic Riffs, and you'll find future stuff about this festival on that site. Back in the spring, well, my history with Jeff goes back to, I think it was over bourbon. The history of graphic novels being part of this is over alcohol, because for years they didn't have graphic novels, and it was local journalists who took the programmers out for beer, and I think they got them liquored up and said, now you're going to say yes to graphic novels. And it was Mr. Jeff Smith who, another journalist, said, hey, I want some of your time, and he's so amazing that, after a little bourbon, I guess what I'm saying is, you get journalists' invitation with alcohol, weird and interesting things will happen, and this is what's happening now. So back in the spring, the festival came and said, we need a rock star who'll come to D.C., and I said, well, Bono seems to be in D.C. every other week. Can't we make that happen? They said, no, we need someone with a rock star person whose life is, it's comical. And I said, well, Justin Bieber's available. And they said, no, we need a cartoonist who will bring people to this event. And I said, I'm available. And they said that we won't have to pay people to come. I thought of one man first, this guy, Mr. Jeff Smith. He's the short history. He's won nearly a dozen Eisner Awards at San Diego Comic-Con, I believe about 10 Harvey Awards at Baltimore Comic-Con. He went from, in 20 years, self-publishing, we'll go over this, self-publishing, talking his wife out of a lucrative job in Silicon Valley, that's persuasive, to help him manage his business, to get publishers, to becoming Scholastic's first book imprinted with Bone, and this epic. He's one of our greatest graphic novelists walking the planet. He really is, because Bone came fully formed. He'd studied Carl Barks's Donald Duck. He'd studied Pogo. He'd studied Peanuts. He'd studied Jack Kirby. And it's a masterpiece. Plus, he'd studied a whole lot of Herman Melville, so he was sneaking Moby Dick in to get us to read. Forward Reviews said of him, Jeff Smith is perhaps the most accomplished cartoonist and storyteller of his generation. No small praise for an artist whose contemporaries include the likes of Alison Bechdel and Chris Ware. RASL, his new one, offers universe-spanning adventure, even explores those tender and terrible territories within the human heart. So he will take us to places, because this man can draw the human heart, Mr. Jeff Smith. Thank you so much for being here and for saying yes to this.
Thank you for asking me.
Part of history. And so we'll have...
I have to be able to see my monitor.
We'll have to look over to see the monitor. But, what you and I talked about is a little bit about your origin story. Right. We talked about, you talked about staring at a phone receiver when you were 5 years old and drawing it, and that being sort of primordial Bone.
Yeah, in fact, I think I have a picture of that in here, but...
Is that a little bit away?
It's a little in.
It's a little in, okay.
How do you want to do this?
Well,
we planned this so well.
I know. It's the damn bourbon. So I think we can go off of Bone. Do you want to say anything as we're looking at the cover?
Well, yeah, what we're looking at is the cover of the Scholastic version of Bone, which was originally my wife and I, Vijaya, published Bone ourselves out of our garage, basically. And we did it as a comic book. But from the very beginning, Vijay and I wrote this business plan. This is in like 1990, where we were going to collect the, of the previous year's comic books into graphic novels, which the term graphic novel existed, but it was barely used, very barely used. Yeah. Like in our business plan, we actually put quotation marks around graphic novel.
You'll be able to auction that someday. Yeah. That'll be worth something.
But our plan was, if we're going to do a giant story that's as long as Moby Dick, it could take years, and we needed people to be able to buy the early chapters to know what the story was going to be.
Sure.
And back then, comic book stores didn't sell graphic novels. In fact, they didn't sell any comic book that was older than a month unless you went and bought it in like the long boxes and those little collectible plastic envelopes, and they were usually marked up a little bit. So we were part of a wave of a generation of cartoonists that were trying to change the way comics are sold and the way they're perceived, because we wanted our work to always be available. Yeah. Just like you can go and buy any Beatles album right now. Yeah. The way comic books were sold in the 1990s, it was as if you could not go buy the White Album. Yeah. You had to go on eBay and pay $10,000 for it or something.
And so it's a leap of faith to talk your wife out of this job and say, will you manage me? I have this vision for Bone, this epic. Did you already have it envisioned as an epic?
I think by the time I was talking to her seriously about quitting her job and me quitting my job, by then I had thought of the story, and she knew the story. I told it to her, and she likes cartoons. She's a geek, She's in the audience, so I have to say nice things too.
Should we point her out?
She's very beautiful. Yes. She's hiding back there.
Oh, okay.
But by the time, and she liked the story, and she encouraged me, and so it was hard. The actual moment when I sold my animation studio, and she was working as a software developer in Silicon Valley, and I talked her into quitting her job. Yeah, it was scary, but on the other hand, somehow it just felt right, and we took the jump. Yeah,
and never had to look back. So should we check out the next?
Oh yeah, let's see what else we got going here. That's good. Huh? Hit the bottom one? All right. So, what's that? Got it. All right.
Those are your personal travel photos, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. So this is a different cover for the one-volume edition. Once Bone was completed, it took 12 years to tell that entire novel, to do it. Yeah. When it was done, part of our plan, that we didn't know if we'd ever get to this or not, was to publish the whole thing in one big honking book, so that people would know it really was a single story that started on the first page. There's someone's holding up a copy.
Nice.
Everybody hold up their copy of their one volume.
Right?
There we go. Hey, all right.
Wow.
Now, and I see different versions of the covers, but the cover that you're seeing on the screen right now is actually taken from a photograph of a forest in southern Ohio called Old Man's Cave. It's a real place. It's in the books, and it's a beautiful place full of trees and giant rocks in the forest, and grottos and cliffs and waterfalls. And I always kind of excited my imagination when I was a kid, and so when I started to do Bone, that's where I wanted to set it. Yeah. So this cover shows a version of Old Man's Cave.
Yeah, it's just beautiful.
Now this picture,
yeah.
This is Bartleby.
Yeah.
And Bartleby is a young baby rat creature, and this is the first time he meets Phone Bone. And he's based on a Great Dane that Vijay and I had just got. So he was a puppy. Yeah. But apparently Great Danes have this habit of leaning on you. I don't know if it's, they're insecure, or they're scared, and or they want to possess you. Yes. They might actually be telling you that they're your boss.
Yes, absolutely.
But they pin you there. Yeah. And they're big, cute babies, but they're just pinning you. And so that's where that came from.
Great.
Now this scene, this is a kind of Moby Dick dream. Mm-hmm. And in it, this kind of relates to my previous pet, Commander, who I was working on this page the day after my 16-year-old Labrador passed away. So I was very sad, and it was a scene where Phone Bone was left alone in the ocean. Yeah. And I don't know if the emotion really comes through, but I look at that page and I see Phone Bone, almost terrified. Don't leave me.
Yeah.
And I can see the emotion in there. This is just more of that same scene.
Sure. Yeah. It's gorgeous.
It's just neato. I love it that people have props.
Right.
This is great.
You can just see who matches, who has the materials. Yeah, go.
I should explain that a lot of these pictures were things that Mike kind of encouraged me to find and bring.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
So now this is before I wrote a single page of Bone, I wrote the ending, and I sketched it out. And so what you're seeing right now is the script page for the very last page of Bone that I did in 1990, and then I started Bone in early 1991. And you can see in there, I'm not close enough to actually be able to read it, but you can see that we're looking down a hill, the bones are moving away from us, and they're making a joke, and I think they're making the joke about give him another $1.
So the whole time you're doing this epic, you have already created the finish line. You know what it looks like?
I have the punchline, and you can see that
Yes.
the end is written in like a script, like in a movie or something. And then here is the real last page, which I did 13, 14 years later.
Yeah.
And it's changed a little bit. It's not the exact same scene. They were in a forest, but now they're in the desert. They're driving away. They're making the same joke, and the end is written like a movie script at the bottom.
In that 13, 14 years, how many dogs did you go through?
3.
Okay.
2, actually.
Okay.
But we have our third one now. He's a pit bull named Preston.
Ooh. Will we see him in Tuki, inspiring Tuki?
No, he hasn't made an appearance yet.
Okay.
He might now.
Yeah.
I don't think they had dogs yet 2 million years ago. I'm not sure what this is. Oh, this is a page. Bone was named by the American Library Association as one of the top 10 most banned books in America. And it's not the top 10 most banned comic books, it's the most banned books. Like,
flat out.
Like number 5 on the list is 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah.
And then Bone.
Right. So, to be clear, S&M, Bone, a cartoon.
Yeah, right.
Cigars and beer and a comic.
Although
worse.
you know what was number 1?
What's that?
It was even higher on the list than 50 Shades
Captain
of Grey.
Underpants?
Captain Underpants
Sure.
by Dave.
Because that's way worse than S&M.
Yeah, because that is.
Yeah.
That is like poopy.
Yes.
That is poopy stuff.
That's poopy. Well, like the Minneapolis school, right? Was it the cigars and the beer they complained about?
Yeah, there's been a number of reasons. The most prevalent one is that there are scenes where there's smoking and there's alcohol. Yeah. Guilty. But my argument, and I was asked to write a letter to be read out at the meeting of the Minneapolis board where they were going to debate this and whether or not they were going to actually ban it or not.
Yeah.
And my argument was, well, it takes place in a medieval setting, sort of like the Lord of the Rings, and a saloon or the tavern or the pub would have been, the center of life. The Bones aren't children, and lastly, the Phone Bone and Thorn, the two heroes of the story, never partake. And it's only kind of the shady characters that do.
And if this had been Falstaff or something in Shakespeare where they were in a tavern, they wouldn't have blinked.
No.
Yeah,
well, some of the other reasons that have been given, and they're not really explained, they're just like a one-word thing, like sexual situations.
Yes.
Which I just heard somebody go, what? Yeah, I think they hold hands maybe once.
Yeah.
Racism.
Yeah.
It was banned for racism. I really don't understand that one. And violence, which I'm like, violence? I mean, the Bones, all they do in a violent situation is run away.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their main thing. But anyway, I, after a few years of these challenges, I've grown to kind of see it as more a reflection of the people doing the challenging. It's almost like an ink blot test.
Or like a Rorschach.
A Rorschach test.
Yeah. And the thing is, though, in 2005, was it Scholastic basically put you in schools? I mean, that must feel like like you get not the last word, but it's sort of like you get to do the neener because now you're read by millions of school children.
Well, you're right, and but it's probably because Scholastic got into schools and it's read by so many kids, and they sell millions of books. That's probably why it gets on those kind of lists.
It's just a numbers thing.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, but So what do we have next?
Oh, I forgot I'm in charge. Here we go.
Okay.
Now, my mother recently claimed that she came across the first drawing I did of Phone Bone, and this is. I don't know that that's really true, but this is definitely really early on, and that's my memory of what he looked like. And I was probably 5 years old. His head is shaped like a big letter C or like a telephone, as you mentioned. Yeah. And he's very angry, and he has like a nightcap on. I don't know why that would be. I'm not that old. I am old enough to remember telephones that were shaped like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's something about his anger that surprised me, and I enjoyed it, and I started working with trying to close his mouth and see what he would look like, with his mouth closed or with other emotions. Yeah. And I something about this little character just kept coming up. Seeing him smile, and I named him Phone Bone because he looks like a telephone, and when his mouth was closed, he looked a little bit more like a cartoon bone. Yeah. And then this angry version kind of resurfaced as his cousin Phony Bone.
Yeah, yeah. And then were you about 10 or 11 when you kind of hit another key point in your development?
Yes, and I got a picture of that, which was when I was about 10 or 11. I started drawing little comics. And in these comics, I think I might only have this one picture, but you can see Phone Bone and Phony Bone are there. And if you were to open this and see, even at 10, Phony Bone is already becoming the Uncle Scrooge type of a miser, the greedy character. He's bossy. And Smiley Bone makes an appearance, and he irritates Phony Bone. And at 10, their personalities are pretty much there.
Wow. So any chance Mom would put any of these on eBay?
Yeah, I better get over there right quick, go through the closet. This was an example of a strip I did for the Ohio State Lantern.
Yeah.
And this was actually, in my mind, was like my Rosetta Stone. This was, it's probably too small to see, but it's basically the strip that I did for Disney Adventures Digest, where Thorn tricks Phone Bone and Phony Bone into going on a treasure hunt so that they'll do their laundry, which...
Yeah, and by college, you seemed fully formed. I mean, things get refined, so. But it was all there. It was
getting there. It was
getting there.
Okay. I hate my college trips. I cannot look at them. I'm constantly having... Publishers are asking me to, publish collections of 4 years of the college versions of Bone. Yeah. But they're so hideous, I
can't do it.
No. Don't do it, Mom.
We'll get that number later. Yeah. And so, and one of the things I want to say is, I speak in schools, and one of the misnomers you often hear is graphic novels are a genre, and it's like, no, graphic novels are an art form. They're a form of expression through a delivery system. They're a refined form of storytelling. A genre is sci-fi or crime noir or fantasy or an adventure.
Yeah, autobiography.
A
category.
Yeah, and with a category. And one thing I point to educators, I say, if you want to understand genre, go to Jeff Smith, because he crosses many genres. You seem to have studied so many. You can do many of them so well, all that I just named. And RASL does quite a few of those.
Well, genre to me it's what storytelling is. I mean, you make believe. So anything that's just very real, obviously, it's a documentary. But what genre does, like fantasy or science fiction, I mean, it allows you to set the world and your expectation and your imagination somewhere where you can let the real world go and you can experience, whatever there is there to be experienced. Yeah. And I always described it as like night vision. you can talk about something, but it's just if in night vision, if you kind of look off to the side a little bit, you can actually see what's going on over there better. And that's what I think genre is really good at.
Yeah. And you and I talked a little bit about with RASL. I mean, to me, you're as cartoonists go, one of the most intellectually curious, and you see it in the work. I mean, you spent a lot of time studying string theory and Tesla way before it was cool. And I mean, electromagnetic waves. Can you talk a little bit about you're both a comics geek and a science geek. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm just a geek. I am a total geek. I only want to write a book that's interesting to me, and one of the secret pleasures of writing is the research that you do. Yeah. And that's, it's actually my job to go in and surf the web, and I was like, what's catching my attention? Oh, Nikola Tesla, or string theory, and parallel universes that come out of string theory, and then watch documentaries or read books. And I love that. I did 4 years of research on RASL, not full time. I mean, I was doing Shazam, I was doing other things, but it was about 4 years of trying to understand, what string theory was talking about. In a nutshell, it's the theory of everything, trying to unite Newtonian physics with particle physics. And the mathematics imply that there are parallel universes, and now I'm like, there we go. Yeah. So I said, let's have an art thief who can go into parallel universes, steal works of art, come back, and fence them in Vegas.
Yes. Yeah.
Now I have a story. Now I can start going from there.
But you also blend in there a sense of noir and the sense of the supernatural, but there's hard-boiled qualities as well. Can you talk about sort of how you did this creative gumbo to create this?
Yeah, genres that we were talking about have certain rules and conventions, and we all kind of know them, whether you think you know them or not. And so I think that kind of funnels the story a certain way. One interesting, what did I just call it? One of the tropes of noir or hard-boiled stories is that you only know what the protagonist knows, what the good guy knows. You don't know, if anything else happens, you can't do what I do in most stories. What I did in Bone was just cut to the rat creatures or the hooded one, and they'll explain what they're going to do. They're going to attack the valley tomorrow.
We get all that exposition.
Exposition, and you know what's going on, and there's a different kind of excitement that you can build with that. Yeah. With this, I could only know, RASL didn't even know who the bad guy was, and he had to figure it out, and the reader couldn't know until he figured it out.
Yeah. In RASL, I feel like a claustrophobia of knowledge. I'm hungry to know what turns the pages. I'm hungry to figure out how he's going to figure it out.
Right. Yeah. That's a genre thing. Yeah. So I'm a geek, and one of the things I was looking for was, what ties all these things together in the Maltese Falcon, a very good genre noir piece. There's the Maltese Falcon. Everybody's after the Maltese Falcon. That's kind of what drives the story. But really, you don't really care about the Maltese Falcon. You only really care about all the characters and their relationships and Humphrey Bogart. Yeah. Well, I needed a Maltese Falcon. And while I was doing the research for RASL, I came across Nikola Tesla, who, as I said, I started researching this like 5, 6, 7 years ago. Nobody knew who Nikola Tesla was. I mean, some people knew who he was, obviously, but now everybody does. But I discovered that I could use Tesla to play the part of the Maltese Falcon, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah. And within that, I mean,
we'll come back to that. We'll come back
Go ahead.
to that. So here's Tesla. I discovered that there are a lot of parallels with the Frankenstein movie, the 1933 James Whale movie, and Tesla. In the original Frankenstein book, the scene where the monster comes alive is more like a seance. Yeah. It's more like they're lighting candles and they're kind of they're willing him to life with their potions and stuff. In the movie, as we all know, there's this great loud contraptions and snapping and crackling, and they raise the monster up and there's lightning. Excuse me. None of that was in the book. That was all because Tesla and Edison were really bringing electricity to the world in a new way in the early 1900s. And so I made those connections in the book. And drew a lot of Tesla stuff in there.
Now, let me ask you about the art, because you can get into an artistic groove when you're doing a 10-volume epic, and you know the characters. It becomes almost like a part of your hand. But here, you have to create different looks. You have to create a style within what you do that matches the genre, matches the story. Can you talk a little bit about that, sort of your approach to RASL?
Yeah, I didn't consciously try to draw the humans that much differently, but I did try to draw them the best I could.
Yeah.
But I was very aware in noir that there's a lot of shadows, a lot of angles. People's faces are cut off a lot by shadows.
Yeah.
And I paid a lot of attention to that. I read about it. And for the Tesla part, these pages that I'm showing here, instead of having Tesla be like a character, like walking around in his laboratory and talking to Edison or something, I wanted to look more like a documentary. So I went and I found lots and lots of photo reference and made collages, so that it was really we were seeing RASL's knowledge of Tesla being shared with us.
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought that would be. That'd be more fun.
Well, because to that point, we're still only getting what he gets, and so we're learning it as he does. Right. Yeah.
And Tesla's life paralleled RASL, so that was interesting.
Yeah.
This was a page I thought was. All right, this was a slight experiment where RASL has met this woman Maya who runs a museum, and she's explaining some of the maze artifacts on the wall, and he's falling in love with her. Or lust.
Does he have the Maya tattoo by this point? I can't remember.
Yeah, he has the Maya tattoo,
Okay.
but she doesn't know it.
Okay, just to indicate.
But she's giving him a tour of the museum, and as she's talking, he starts paying more attention to the line of her jaw, or the hollow of her neck, or the dimple in the back of her shoulder, and as I had her talking, I had the balloon empty and kind of moving off off this way. And I think it works that when you read this, you actually do forget that she's talking, but the balloon's there. And then the last panel, she turns and confronts the reader as well as RASL and says, "Are you even listening to me?"
And it works brilliantly, because as a reader, we immediately know those moments in our own lives where we see something and we just, yeah.
All right. So we'll zoom back through Tesla here. Yeah.
Tuki, the webcomic. Any Tuki fans here? Go back 2 million years, is it?
Yeah, let's. Do you want to have time to do questions?
Yeah,
we could.
What do we? 5 minutes. We do want to do some questions.
All right, so I'll just do a quick shout out for Tuki, which is my new project. It takes place 2 million years ago, when multiple species of hominids existed at the same time. There was one of the first really great ice ages, which captured all the moisture on the planet in the ice caps. So Africa experienced a huge drought, and all the animals, including the early hominids, were all going extinct. Well, somebody had to be the first human to leave Africa, and we know that happened around 2 million years ago. So that's the story. Tuki is the first human to leave Africa. Yeah. That's what that story.
And you have the new. You've bound the webcomic in a hard. I mean,
it's a webcomic. You can read it for free on Boneville.com.
Yeah. And RASL won just a number of awards recently, right?
RASL won Best Graphic Album at the Eisner Awards this year.
Eisner Awards in July, San Diego Comic Con.
And Tuki won.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mom. Tuki Tuki won Best Webcomic at the National Cartoonist Society.
Yeah,
so,
great.
So it was a good year. It was definitely a good year.
I see. Mom just put it on eBay, I see, by the way. So we do want to do questions, get to a few. If we have the 2 microphones set up, just step up to the microphone, please. Yeah. Yes, please.
Hello, Mr. Smith. Nice to finally meet you.
Hello.
My name is Bob Hoffman with the Middle East Film and Comic-Con, and I was just in town, had no idea this was going on until today.
Wow.
I've been teaching Bone in classes for 10 years.
Wow.
It's an honor.
Thank you.
Wow.
This is something, thanks. This is something I've wondered a few times over the years. Have you ever been back to Old Man's Cave, you and Vijaya?
Yes, we haven't been there. We didn't go there this year. We had a lot on our plates this year, but generally we go back 2 or 3 times a summer. Yeah, it's. Have you been there? Have you ever been there?
For the first time this year. Beautiful.
Oh, it's really something, isn't it?
Yeah, it is very much what you see in the books.
Yeah. But the fact you tagged it, Jeff Smith was here, kind of good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up, speaking of travel. I think you and Vijaya took some time off during Bone to actually travel, and you incorporated some of that in the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The final act of Bone takes place in like a kingdom that Grandma Ben and Thorne had come from, and they talked about it all throughout the book. So I wanted, and then the Lord of the Rings movies were coming out right then, and all of a sudden I thought, well, I don't want to do the Lord of the Rings type of a castle, a King Arthur, Disney, Cinderella castle. I needed something else. And my wife is from India. Her family's from India. She's from here. But we went back to visit, and we traveled around India looking for architecture. And we actually went up to Nepal and Kathmandu, and that's where I found my city of Athea, because I needed a place that once was great and powerful, but has since fallen on hard times. I needed some place that was full of mysticism, because there was a lot of implications from Grandma that there was, dragons and dreaming and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I was able to. I found Kathmandu, and I'm like, this is it. And I took some pictures, but I also spent a lot of time just drawing little sketches of, dogs laying in the road, or chickens, or what does the gutter on the side of the road look like, things like that. So
awesome. If you ever made it, or if you didn't have time to make it to Dubai, we'd love to have you both.
That would be awesome.
All right.
I'll find you.
Thanks.
Dubai Con 2015. Yeah. Yes.
I wanted to revisit the question about art. You said in RASL you didn't consciously draw the humans that much differently, but it seems like you made some really deliberate choices with the protagonist's head, for example, and the lizard-faced man. So it seemed very almost Dick Tracy in a way. So I wanted to, if you could talk about why you chose to do that, if it was a conscious choice or it was just fun.
It was a conscious choice, and when I didn't make that much of a difference. I was like, by the time I got to the end of Bone, I was really trying to draw Thorne's hands as good as I could draw them. Like actually show how the wrinkles in the palm work and all that kind of stuff. So I was still trying to do that. But yes, I actually saw a review of RASL somewhere that was like science fiction with big heads or something like that. My earliest drawings of RASL were very manga flavored with his giant hair. And for some reason I wanted him to be very primitive. So I wanted to be a tough mug and be kind of beat up with his broken lightning bolt nose. And yes, you nailed it. The lizard-faced guy is just a Dick Tracy, Chester Gould villain who's evil because, he looks evil and he is evil. That's it.
Thank you.
Nice.
All right.
Yeah. Yes, please.
I really enjoyed the Bone series, but one thing I noticed was that as the series progressed, it just got kind of darker and darker, and we had all these darker themes. And
It's sort of like growing up.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you planned that out on purpose, like from the beginning you're like, okay, this is gonna start getting darker and scarier, or were you like, this is gonna be lighthearted, then as you kept on going, you're like, whoa, this is getting dark.
I did plan it out on purpose. I remember people in the comic book community were a little surprised because they were reading it. A chapter would come out every 2 months as a comic book, and they really thought it was just gonna be, a Donald Duck type of a story. Here's the Marx Brothers or whatever. But I did plan it out that way. Because when things go bad, when the world starts to go to hell in a handbasket, you needed to care about the world before. So I wanted the early chapters to be fun. That's why the cow race is there. I wanted you to miss that when the rat creatures came and the ghost circles came and everything was gone. So I really wanted to really make you like everybody and love the world and wish Grandma Ben's cabin was still in one piece and that kind of thing. So yes.
Yeah, you did a very good job with the series. I'm definitely going to look into your other books.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes?
Hi. Really enjoy the Bone books. I've been reading them ever since like they started coming out. And a couple of years ago, a little rumor was going around about a Bone movie being made and how it was rejected for a reason or another. Can you elaborate on that, perchance?
Yes, Warner Brothers bought the rights to it about 5 years ago, and I'm not sure I can get you excited about it because 5 years is a long time, and I think they kind of got a little lost. And they keep making Lego movies. So who knows? Maybe they'll do a Bone Lego movie. I don't know.
Yes.
All right.
I was going to ask about the movie, but I have another question. But if I can begin with a quick thank you for one of the great family bonding experiences of my life.
Wow.
I read Bone originally in the comic form, but then when the collected version came out, and then I was married and a father, read it as a family with my wife and daughter and son. Read it out loud. It was a great experience, and everybody loves the book. So
thanks,
it was
man.
like reading it for the first time.
Well, that would be fun to read it with new eyes. That would be good.
Yeah.
I didn't write Bone for Children. I wrote it. Two other cartoon comic book heads. And I just was using the language of Carl Barks and Walt Kelly, and I figured they would understand it. But it took me so long to do the novel, 12 years, that people read it, got married and had kids and started reading to their kids, and then it became a real children's book.
Will you go back to the characters? The thing you did in the Washington Post, is that the first new Bone strip since the end of?
That's the first. That's one of the first. Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
Well,
That's the way I'll go back to them. I'm not going to do another actual Bone comic. Moby Dick has no sequel, and I will have no sequel.
Melville Smith, as it should be. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I was actually one of those people who, back in 1995, started realizing, wow, this is getting kind of dark as it was going along, and started to go back to that. I was just wondering, do you have any advice for people who are writing things that are trying to balance the really light Walt Kelly with the much darker elements, ghost circles kind of thing?
Yes, go read Walt Kelly. I mean, Walt Kelly it was sort of the beginning of my awakening that comics could be funny and dark and meaningful. And I think the comics, any author should have a moral point of view. And Walt Kelly was really the beginning of that. And all Walt Kelly is being reprinted right now by Graphix. And there's only like 2 of them out. Get them. Yeah. That's the deal.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting
we're real close. Is there a way we can just get two quickly?
Yeah, 2. I think we have time for 2.
Yep.
All right.
Was it you or Tom Snegoski's idea for the Quest of the Spark?
It was Tom's. Tom had this idea for the story, and he really wanted to write it. And at the same time, Scholastic wanted more Bone. And I said, I'm just going to get you crazy cats together. We worked together, though. He told me the story. I made some suggestions so that it would be more in line with the Bone universe. And I thought he did a pretty good job. I thought he really captured, like, the rat creatures kind of personalities.
Yeah. Yes, right here.
Like, in the Bone books, there were those 2 stupid rat creatures that would always be clumsy. One would always like quiche. Were you ever thinking of naming them?
No, I wasn't, because, and I'll tell you why. I originally was not going to have, I was just going to have these hordes of rat creatures. These rats were just going to come out of there. And one day, I thought, well, maybe it'd be more interesting if we actually knew someone, if we knew some of the rats.
Sure.
So we came up with these 2 rats, and the story behind the quiche. And so the older people in the audience will know what I'm talking about. When I was doing Bone in the Lantern in my college paper, there was a book out that was very popular for about a year.
Real Men
Don't Eat Quiche. Yeah. And that was my whole joke, was that real monsters don't eat quiche. And I probably made much more money off of that than the original guy did.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. That's
Thank
It's
you
a
all
real
for
treat
coming
having
tonight.
you here. Now, we have time. We have time for a raffle. Jeff has been generous enough to donate 3 prizes. I believe a Tuki. So let's start. Don't we have the Tuki? Yeah. So you pull a ticket, and we'll call the numbers. So we'll do first a Tuki. Yeah.
All right, so the first ticket is, are all the first numbers the same? Will that save me some time?
No.
No. Got to read them all. 536940. Yeah.
Right there.
we
Nice.
go. All right.
Nice.
Well, that was satisfying.
All right. Is this what you want to present?
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
Stick around afterwards and I'll
All right, we'll sign it after.
All right, and we got-
Personalize it. So second is the RASL book, right?
The RASL book. All right. 536962.
Okay.
Anybody in
Anyone?
here?
Do you have to be here to win?
No.
Okay, 10 seconds.
All right. 537119.
I think it's got company down
All right. This is gonna take a while, isn't it?
there.
Don't dig too deep. There's a lot of tickets in there. 537034.
Okay.
All right, why don't you just give me your ticket? All right. 537226.
All
Yay.
right. Yay. Okay.
I'm starting to grab handfuls of them there.
Okay. You can present, please.
There you go, buddy.
Congratulations. And you'll sign that after, right?
Oh, they're
Great.
signed.
So this is boom.
Oh, now this is okay. This is the big slipcase.
Wow, the slipcase bone.
This is like the absolute edition. It's full color, hardcover. All right, here we go. 536665. Nope.
Ooh. Yeah.
Yay! 536558. Yay! 536559. Did it? Yes. There you go. All right.
Okay. Lift from the knees. All right. Congratulations. Well,
All right. Well, that was fun.
thank you guys so much. Thank you, Jeff Smith.
Good night.
Thank you so
Good
much.
night, Washington.
Thank you, guys. You can all say you're part of the first graphic novel night ever at the National Book Festival. You're a part of history. Thank you so much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.